He could not draw breath. At the end of that second rotation, he was pretty sure it was only 2, Brownlaw felt the big hands lock around his arms and fling him out the window. The air was cool, and he felt absolutely alone. His first thought was that he could stop his fall using pure willpower. And it seemed to be true. He focused all of his will on staying up. Up, up, up. Raising his arms, Robbie clawed the sky and felt his body suspended in the great liberty of air. He wasn't falling at all, but moving forward with good speed, and for an instant he wondered if he might collide with the building across the street, or maybe even crash through a window, land on his feet, and get back to the Sorrento before the waitress took away his lunch. Then Brownlaw came to the end of his outward momentum. There was no hesitation, no moment of suspension, just a heavy pivot of weight, and down he went. Fast, then faster. He had never felt such speed before, nothing close to this. Faster still. Robbie Brownlaw, on his back now with his arms spread and his hands reaching for nothing, watched the top of the Las Palmas rise up into the gray clouds and felt his ears bend forward in the awesome velocity of descent. He understood that he was now in the hands of something much larger than himself, if he was in any kind of hands at all. He thought of his young wife, Gina, with whom he was ferociously in love. He understood that the power of their love would be a factor in the outcome here. It seemed impossible that their days together were about to come to an end. Something like relief flowed through Robbie, and as the clouds rose away from him, he tried to figure his estimated time of arrival. 16 feet per second? But is that only at first? Surely you accelerate faster. How high is a story in an old hotel? The phrase, 2 more seconds, came into his mind. But in spite of Robbie's belief that he would live to love Gina for years to come, a more convincing idea now flashed into his brain. This is it. He suddenly believed in the God he had doubted for all his life, his conversion completed in a fraction of a second. Then he let go. He felt insight and understanding. He saw that his first 5 years of life had been happy, that his childhood had been filled with wonder, his teenage years were a search for freedom, his young adulthood had been a storm of confusion and yearning for love, his 20s a happy grind of Gina and friends and Gina and friends and Gina and Gina and Gina. And Robbie plummeted through the screams of sirens and alarms and onlookers and crashed through the faded red awning over the entrance to the Las Palmas Hotel like an anvil through a bedsheet and hit the sidewalk with a cracking, echoless thud. 1. My name is Robbie Brownlaw, and I am a homicide detective for the city of San Diego. I'm 29 years old. My life was ordinary until 3 years ago when I was thrown out of a downtown hotel window. No one knows it except my wife, but I now have synesthesia, a neurological condition where your senses get mixed up. Sometimes when people talk to me, I see their voices as colored shapes. It happens when they get emotional. The shapes are approximately 2 by 2 inches, and there are usually between 4 and 8 of them, sometimes more. They linger in the air, midway between the speaker and me, about head high. They fade quickly. I can move them with my finger or a pen if I want. Shortly after my fall, I used graph paper and colored markers to make a chart of which words and word combinations triggered which colored shapes. This was time-consuming and not always pleasant, due to some very painful headaches. I also observed that blue triangles generally came from a happy speaker. Red squares came from a deceptive one. Green trapezoids usually came from someone who was envious. Green really is the color of envy, just like we were always told. But as the weeks went by, I noticed that identical words and sentences could sometimes trigger very different shapes and colors. I was afraid that I had post-traumatic swelling in my brain, and worried that my synesthesia would worsen to the point where I'd spend the rest of my life drooling at invisible shapes while people tried to talk to me. I spoke my fears to Gina one night, and noticed that when she told me I shouldn't worry about it, her words came to me as the black triangles of dread. I looked them up on my chart just to make sure. It was then that I began to understand that the colorful shapes are provoked by the emotions of the speaker, not by the words themselves. So I have